The rain was falling heavily, turning the streets into shiny rivers that reflected the dim lights of the town. Inside his small garage, the mechanic wiped the sweat from his brow, even though the day had started hours ago. His hands were covered in oil and grease, and the smell of metal and motor oil hung thick in the air. He loved his work, loved the way engines roared back to life under his careful hands, but lately it had been a struggle. Business was slow, bills were piling up, and every day felt heavier than the last. The mechanic had always believed in doing the right thing. It wasn't about the money or the recognition, or even the satisfaction of a job well done. It was about knowing that the work he did could make a real difference. And tonight, as the rain splashed against the garage windows, that belief was about to be tested. A loud siren broke the quiet rhythm of the rain. The mechanic looked up, his heart skipping a beat as he saw an ambulance pull up to his garage. The vehicle's lights flashed wildly and the paramedics jumped out, their faces tense with urgency. He could see the fear and determination in their eyes. Without a word, they pointed to the ambulance engine and gestured frantically. The mechanic understood immediately. Something was very wrong, and every second counted. He set down the wrench he was holding and ran toward the ambulance. The paramedics explained that the engine had stalled in the middle of the road, leaving them stranded while a patient inside was in critical condition. The mechanic didn't ask any questions. He could hear the faint beeping from the ambulance monitor through the closed doors. Every heartbeat was precious. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, lives could be lost. He opened the hood and began examining the engine, his mind focused entirely on the task at hand. His hands moved with precision, fingers trained by years of experience. Sparks flew as he worked, and the sound of metal against metal mixed with the heavy rain outside. Time seemed to stretch and compress at once. Every minute felt like an hour, but he didn't falter. He had faced many challenges before, but this one felt different. There was a weight to it, a responsibility that pressed down on him. The paramedics hovered nearby, offering tools or instructions when needed, but mostly giving him space. They trusted his skill, and he could feel their eyes on him, anxious yet hopeful. The mechanic wiped his hands on a rag and tightened a bolt, then adjusted a part that seemed to have shifted. He could hear the faint coughing of the patient inside, each sound pulling at his focus, reminding him of the stakes. Minutes passed, though they felt like an eternity. The mechanic worked through the storm, drenched by rain that sneaked in through the open garage doors. The wind howled outside and the streets were slick with water, but inside there was only the engine, the tools, and the life depending on his hands. He didn't think about money or rules or what his boss might say. There was no room for hesitation. There was only action. Finally, after what felt like hours but was really only a brief moment, the engine gave a low rumble. The mechanic held his breath, listening as it grew louder, stronger, until the vehicle was alive again. The ambulance monitor's beeping became steadier, more normal, and the paramedics let out sighs of relief. One of them clapped him on the shoulder, gratitude shining in their eyes. The mechanic nodded, wiping the sweat and rain from his face, trying to catch his own breath. The ambulance doors closed and the paramedics rushed the patient away. Through the glass, he could see them moving quickly, carefully, but with a sense of urgency that only heightened the weight of the moment. He stood there for a long time, watching the vehicle disappear into the stormy night, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and quiet pride. He had done what needed to be done. He had helped save a life, but he had no idea who the patient was, and that would soon become the twist that changed everything. The garage fell silent once more, save for the patter of rain against the roof. The mechanic leaned against a workbench, rubbing his aching hands. He thought about the night, about the urgency, about the weight of the decision he made without a second thought. He felt proud, yes, but there was also a lingering sense of uncertainty. In this world, good deeds didn't always lead to recognition or reward. Sometimes they simply existed as quiet acts of humanity, unseen and uncelebrated. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about tonight was different. Something about the way the ambulance had arrived, the way the paramedics had looked at him, suggested that this act of service might ripple further than he could imagine. But for now, there was work to be done, bills to pay, and life to live. He turned back to his tools, to the familiar rhythm of his work, unaware that this night would set in motion a chain of events that would change his life in ways he could never foresee. As he cleaned up his garage, he noticed small details he usually overlooked: the dripping water from a leaky roof, the worn-out oil stains on the floor, the tools scattered from the day's work. Each of these details reminded him of the life he lived, the struggles he faced, and the resilience he carried. He smiled faintly, thinking about how unpredictable life could be. One moment he was a simple mechanic focused on fixing engines. The next he was part of a story that would echo far beyond the walls of his garage. He didn't know it yet, but this night was only the beginning. A night of rain, a stalled engine, and a desperate ambulance had brought him to a crossroads. The choices he made, the work he performed without hesitation, would soon intersect with a world he had never been part of, a world of power, influence, and unforeseen consequences. But in that moment he didn't think about any of that. He only thought about doing what was right, and that was enough to guide him through the storm. Hours later, as the rain finally began to ease and the first hints of dawn touched the sky, the mechanic closed the garage doors and locked them. He paused, looking at the wet streets glistening in the early light. The world felt different, somehow heavier and yet full of possibilities. He had acted without thought for reward, without concern for protocol, and in doing so he had reminded himself of the kind of person he wanted to be. He headed home, tired but with a quiet sense of fulfillment, unaware that his life was about to change forever because of one rainy night and one emergency repair. The next morning the mechanic woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside and the faint glow of sunlight creeping through the curtains. The night had been long, filled with rain and adrenaline, and although sleep had come in fragments, his mind was still replaying the urgency of the ambulance repair. He got out of bed slowly, stretching his sore muscles and thinking about the strange series of events that had unfolded just a day before. The garage awaited him, its doors still carrying the memory of yesterday's storm. He knew that once he stepped inside, the routine of engines, oil, and tools would envelop him again. But before that, he made a cup of coffee, taking a moment to breathe, letting the warmth fill him as he stared out at the streets glistening in the morning light. Life, he realized, had a strange way of throwing unexpected moments at people. One moment everything felt ordinary. The next it could be a matter of life and death. When he reached the garage, the day began like any other. He checked his tools, arranged the wrenches and screwdrivers, and inspected the vehicles waiting for repair. But there was a quiet tension in the air, almost as if the garage itself was holding its breath. Something had shifted, though he could not yet place what it was. The mechanic worked methodically, fixing brakes, tuning engines, and replacing worn-out parts. Each task required focus, but his mind kept drifting back to the ambulance, to the patient inside, and to the urgency that had filled the night. Hours passed quickly. The rain had stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the sunlight in a sparkling dance. The mechanic noticed a few neighbors walking past, casting curious glances at his garage, but he paid them little attention. His world was filled with the hum of motors, the scent of oil, and the rhythm of his own steady heartbeat. It was peaceful in its own way, a quiet after the storm, yet he could not shake the feeling that something larger was coming. Then the phone rang. Its shrill tone cut through the calm, startling him. He picked it up quickly, expecting perhaps a client or supplier, but the voice on the other end was tense and hurried. It was one of the paramedics from the previous night. The voice was full of urgency, mixed with gratitude. They wanted to confirm the details of the repair, to make sure that everything the mechanic had done had been noted. He answered patiently, describing the work and the steps he had taken, unaware that the information he was providing would soon reach places he never imagined. After hanging up, he went back to his work, trying to focus. But his mind kept wandering to the ambulance and the patient. Who was inside? What would happen next? He tried to push these thoughts aside, knowing that he had done everything he could in that critical moment. Still, a sense of anticipation lingered. Life, he knew, had a way of catching up to acts of kindness in ways that were often unexpected. As the day progressed, the mechanic received a visit from his boss. The man was serious, almost stern, with a sharp edge in his tone. The mechanic felt a knot in his stomach, a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. His boss spoke about protocol, company rules, and responsibility. He mentioned that acting without permission, even with good intentions, could not be overlooked. The mechanic listened quietly, nodding, though he felt the weight of injustice pressing down on him. The words stung. He had acted in an emergency with a life at stake, yet now he was being scolded as if his actions were wrong. And then came the shock. He was being let go, fired. The explanation was methodical, almost cold. His boss spoke of company policy, risk management, and potential liability. But the mechanic could see it for what it felt like, a punishment for doing what was right. He felt a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. How could helping someone in need result in this? How could saving a life be treated as a mistake? He left the office with a heavy heart, carrying the weight of the decision. Outside, the world seemed brighter, but it did nothing to lift the shadow over his thoughts. He walked through the streets slowly, his mind racing through memories of his work, the ambulance, the patient. Each step was accompanied by a swirl of emotions, frustration, sadness, but also a quiet pride that he had acted correctly when it mattered most. Back at home, he sat by the window staring out at the town waking up. Children were laughing on their way to school. Shopkeepers were opening their stores, and cars moved through the streets like small rivers of life. The world carried on, indifferent to his personal struggle, yet he felt a sense of connection. He had played a part in something bigger, even if no one around him realized it yet. As the day went on, whispers started to circulate in the town. People began talking about the ambulance incident, about the patient who had survived against the odds. Rumors spread about a powerful person who had been inside the vehicle, a person whose life was considered valuable far beyond the ordinary. The mechanic heard bits and pieces, curious but not fully aware of the identity of the patient. Still, he could feel the tide beginning to shift. His actions had set events in motion that would reach far beyond his garage. In the evening, the mechanic received another call, this time from a reporter. The voice on the other end was polite, inquisitive, and filled with interest. They had heard about the miraculous ambulance repair and wanted to speak to the person responsible. The mechanic felt a mix of surprise and hesitation. He was not one to seek attention, never had been. But as he spoke, recounting the night, the urgency, and the decision to act, he realized that his story resonated with people. There was something compelling about selflessness in the face of danger, about doing the right thing without expecting reward. By the time night fell, the mechanic sat alone in his garage reflecting on the day. He had been fired, yet his actions were being recognized by others. The sense of injustice from the morning lingered, but it was tempered by the awareness that what he had done mattered, that it had made a difference. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a reassurance that even in a world that sometimes seemed harsh and unforgiving, integrity and courage had their place. As he cleaned his tools and closed the garage doors for the night, he couldn't help but think about the patient, about the life that had been saved. He wondered who it was, what kind of person they were, and how this act of repair would ripple through the world. Little did he know, the identity of the patient would soon be revealed, and it would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride, a moment to feel the impact of his choices, knowing that sometimes the right action is its own reward. He locked the doors and walked into the night, the cool breeze brushing against his face, carrying with it the scent of rain and possibility. Life had thrown him a curveball, yet it had also shown him the power of compassion, skill, and courage. The mechanic knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, and perhaps new opportunities. But tonight, he let himself simply be grateful for having acted when it mattered most, and for the knowledge that even in a small town, a single act of courage could echo far beyond what anyone could imagine. The mechanic woke early the next day, the sunlight streaming through his small apartment window, casting long shadows on the floor. His body still ached from the previous night, but it was the thoughts in his mind that weighed him down more than anything else. Being fired had hit him hard. It wasn't just the loss of a job. It was the feeling of being punished for doing the right thing, for acting in the middle of an emergency when a life depended on him. He felt a mixture of anger, frustration, and disbelief, but also a quiet, stubborn pride that he had not hesitated when it mattered most. He dressed quickly, trying to push the heaviness from his chest, and went for a walk to clear his mind. The town was alive with its usual rhythm, shopkeepers opening doors, children laughing as they walked to school, and cars moving slowly along the wet streets from the recent rain. Everything seemed normal, but the mechanic's world felt off balance. He had fixed engines for years, faced countless problems, and never expected recognition. But to be dismissed despite having helped save a life left a sour taste in his mouth. As he walked, he noticed small whispers among neighbors and acquaintances. Some mentioned the ambulance. Others spoke in hushed tones about a mysterious patient who had survived a critical situation. The mechanic listened quietly, realizing that his actions were starting to become a story in the town. He had not sought attention, yet somehow his role was beginning to surface. The whispers made him uneasy, but also a little curious. Who was the person inside the ambulance, and how far would this story go? Returning to his apartment, he tried to focus on practical matters. Bills had to be paid, and he couldn't afford to sit idly by. But every time he tried to concentrate, his thoughts drifted back to the ambulance, the engine, and the patient he had helped. He thought about the tension of that night, the fear in the paramedic's eyes, and the beeping monitor inside the vehicle. He had acted without thinking, instinctively doing what he knew was right, yet now consequences were falling on him. It felt both unfair and surreal. Later that day, the mechanic received a call from one of his former colleagues. The voice on the line was hesitant at first, almost careful. They spoke about the incident with the ambulance and how word was spreading. The mechanic listened silently, surprised at how quickly news traveled. People were talking about the miraculous repair, about how the ambulance had started just in time to save a life. The mechanic felt a strange mixture of pride and apprehension. Pride for helping someone in need, apprehension because he still did not know the identity of the person he had saved. Throughout the day, he heard more accounts from neighbors and acquaintances. Each retelling of the event added new details, though some were exaggerated or inaccurate. The mechanic tried to focus on the truth, on what really happened in the garage during the storm. The urgency, the sweat, the fear, it all replayed in his mind. He remembered the exact moment the engine roared to life, the relief on the paramedics' faces, and the fleeting glimpse of the patient being rushed away. It was a memory etched deeply into him, a reminder of the human capacity to act in moments of crisis. Despite the growing attention, the mechanic felt the sting of being fired more keenly than ever. He had lost his job, the security of routine, and the comfort of stability. Yet, there was something in him that refused to regret his actions. He had chosen to do the right thing when it counted. In a world where rules often outweighed compassion, he had trusted his instincts, and that mattered more than any job or paycheck. As evening approached, the mechanic received another unexpected call. This time, it was from someone higher up, someone who had heard about the incident through official channels. The voice was formal yet curious, asking questions about the repair, the urgency, and the steps he had taken. The mechanic answered carefully, recounting the details, unaware of how significant this conversation would become. Every word he spoke seemed to carry weight, each explanation painting a picture of a man who acted with skill, courage, and integrity. After the call, he sat alone in the quiet of his apartment, thinking about the chain of events that had begun with a single act of service. The world seemed vast and unpredictable, yet he could feel the ripples of his actions spreading outward, reaching places he had never imagined. He had not sought recognition, yet recognition was finding him, slowly but surely. That night the mechanic could not sleep. His mind raced with possibilities, with questions, with the anticipation of what was to come. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the window, a reminder of the stormy night that had changed everything. He thought about the patient, the life he had helped save, and the unknown journey that lay ahead. Somewhere out there, the person inside the ambulance was recovering, unaware of the man who had made the difference in that critical moment. In the days that followed, the town's chatter grew louder. More people were speaking about the incident, and the name of the mechanic began to circulate. He remained humble, almost embarrassed by the attention. Yet he could not ignore the growing realization that his life might be about to shift in ways he had never imagined. The identity of the patient, still unknown to him, loomed like a mystery, a key to a door that might open new opportunities or challenges. Throughout this time, the mechanic continued to reflect on his values, his choices, and the unpredictable nature of life. He had always believed that helping others was its own reward, but now he began to see that sometimes actions carried consequences far beyond what one could foresee. The gratitude of the paramedics, the whispers in the town, and the inquiries from higher-ups all pointed to a larger world that was beginning to take notice of his courage and skill. He spent long hours in the garage, not for work, but for thought. Tools were arranged neatly, engines idle, and the scent of oil and metal filled the air. It was a space of contemplation, a place where he could process the whirlwind of events and the emotions they stirred. He considered the irony of being punished for doing the right thing, and marveled at how life could be both unfair and full of opportunity at the same time. By the end of the week, the mechanic felt a sense of readiness. He did not know what would come next, but he was aware that change was on the horizon. The experience had strengthened him, shaped him, and prepared him for encounters and challenges he had never imagined. He understood now that one act of courage could set in motion a series of events capable of altering the course of a life, or even more than one life. Late one night, he sat by the window once more, watching the rain glisten under the streetlights. He thought about the patient, the paramedics, and the strange path that had led him here. A sense of calm washed over him, tempered by anticipation and curiosity. Life had surprised him, tested him, and recognized him in ways he had never expected. And somewhere he sensed, the moment of revelation, the meeting with the person whose life he had saved, was drawing near, ready to change everything he thought he knew about consequence, gratitude, and destiny. Days passed slowly, yet the mechanic could feel the tension of the past week still gripping him. Each morning he would wake and go through his routine, walking the same streets, visiting the same stores, and observing the town's rhythm, but nothing felt normal anymore. The whispers of the ambulance incident continued to circulate, and he noticed the curious glances from people he didn't know, as if they were trying to place him within the story they had heard. He did not seek attention, and yet attention found him in quiet waves. One afternoon, as he was cleaning his garage and organizing tools, a black car pulled up outside. It was sleek, well-maintained, and unlike anything he had seen in his small town. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, looking around with purpose before approaching him. The mechanic straightened, unsure of what to expect. The man introduced himself as a representative of the patient from the ambulance, a powerful figure who had survived the critical night because of the mechanic's quick action. The mechanic's eyes widened, disbelief mixing with a hint of excitement. He had fixed the vehicle, saved a life, and now the person whose life he had saved wanted to meet him. The meeting was arranged for the following day. The mechanic spent that night thinking about what he would say, how he would react, and whether he was ready for what lay ahead. He felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. He had never imagined that one decision to act in the moment of crisis could lead to this point, where a powerful person sought him out to express gratitude personally. The weight of the previous events, the firing, the whispers, the uncertainty, was about to be transformed into something entirely new. The next morning, the mechanic walked to the designated meeting place, a small office in the heart of the town. His heart pounded as he pushed the door open. Inside, the patient sat, calm and composed, yet radiating authority and strength. The moment their eyes met, the mechanic felt an unspoken connection, a recognition of the shared experience that had occurred during that stormy night. Words seemed inadequate, but the patient spoke first, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the life-saving repair and for the courage shown in acting without hesitation. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with questions, explanations, and shared reflections on the night of the ambulance repair. The patient recounted the severity of the situation, the fear that had gripped the paramedics, and the critical moments that hung in balance. The mechanic listened carefully, absorbing every word, realizing for the first time the true impact of his actions. This was more than a simple emergency repair. It was a turning point in someone's life, a moment where skill, courage, and decisiveness converged to make the difference between life and death. After the initial conversation, the patient offered something the mechanic had never expected, an opportunity. They spoke of potential positions, responsibilities, and projects that could leverage the mechanic's skill, integrity, and calm under pressure. The offer was generous and transformative, representing not just employment, but recognition, respect, and the chance to grow beyond the limitations of his small-town garage. The mechanic felt a mix of awe and humility. He had acted out of necessity, not ambition, yet here was an unexpected reward, born entirely from the consequence of his selfless action. In the following days, the mechanic transitioned into this new world. He learned the protocols, the standards, and the expectations of working alongside powerful individuals, and he discovered that the skills he had honed in his small garage were highly valued in this larger context. Each day brought new challenges, requiring not just technical skill but also patience, communication, and the ability to respond decisively under pressure. The mechanic thrived, not because he sought recognition, but because he continued to act with integrity, focus, and a dedication to doing what was right. Word of the mechanic's role in saving the patient's life began to spread more widely. Media outlets, community members, and colleagues spoke of the story with admiration and respect. The narrative shifted from a tale of a small-town man facing unjust consequences to a story of courage, skill, and integrity recognized at the highest levels. The mechanic remained humble, emphasizing the team effort, the paramedics' bravery, and the importance of acting quickly in critical moments. Yet the acknowledgement of his actions had a profound impact, changing perceptions, opening doors, and inspiring others. As the weeks passed, the mechanic reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The memory of the stormy night, the tension, and the fear had not faded, but it had been transformed into a symbol of the impact one person could have in a moment of crisis. He had acted without concern for reward or recognition, and in doing so, had set in motion a series of events that altered not just his life, but the life of someone whose influence and power reached far beyond the town. He continued to visit his old garage occasionally, not to return to the past but to stay grounded in the skills and values that had defined him. Each visit reminded him of the importance of humility, courage, and dedication. He understood that while opportunities and recognition could come unexpectedly, the true measure of a person lay in the choices made when no one was watching, when lives hung in the balance and when integrity was tested. The mechanic's life had shifted, yet he remained the same in essence. A man committed to his work, to helping others, and to acting with courage when circumstances demanded it. The meeting with the patient, the acknowledgement, and the new opportunities were all remarkable, yet they were secondary to the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had done the right thing at the right time. This understanding became his guiding principle, a compass for navigating both personal and professional challenges in the days to come. Late one evening, the mechanic walked through the town, reflecting on the series of events that had transformed his life. He observed the streets, the shops, the people going about their routines, and he realized that the impact of one person's actions could ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. A simple decision to act, to repair an engine in a moment of urgency, had led to life-changing recognition, opportunities, and a renewed sense of purpose. As he paused to look at the night sky, the mechanic felt a profound sense of gratitude and humility. He had faced a storm, both literal and metaphorical, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the power of human action. The patient's gratitude, the professional opportunities, and the recognition were meaningful, but the deeper satisfaction came from knowing that courage, skill, and integrity could change the course of a life. And as he walked back home, he understood that this was only the beginning, that life had more challenges and opportunities ahead, and that the principles that guided him through the storm would continue to serve him in ways both seen and unseen. The morning air was crisp and clean as the mechanic stepped outside, feeling a sense of anticipation and calm, unlike anything he had experienced before. The events of the past weeks had reshaped his life in ways he could hardly comprehend. From the stormy night of the ambulance repair to the unexpected meeting with the patient, his life had been on a whirlwind path of challenge, uncertainty, and now opportunity. Today he felt ready to embrace the new chapter that awaited him. He walked to the office where he would formally begin his work alongside the patient, who had revealed themselves to be a powerful CEO. As he approached, the sleek building reflected the sunlight, and the hum of activity inside reminded him of the larger world he was about to enter. The mechanic felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. He had always been skilled in his craft, confident in his ability to handle engines, machines, and emergencies. But this was different. This was about navigating a world of influence, responsibility, and trust on a much larger scale. Inside, he was greeted warmly by the CEO and their team. They introduced him to the workspace, the tools, and the projects he would be involved in. It was clear that the CEO respected not just his technical ability, but also his integrity and the courage he had shown that night. The mechanic listened attentively, absorbing instructions, learning procedures and familiarizing himself with the new environment. Though the equipment was more advanced than what he had worked with in his small garage, he quickly realized that his hands, experience, and instinct would guide him as effectively here as they had before. The first weeks were a mix of adaptation and learning. The mechanic tackled tasks that ranged from repairing complex machinery to overseeing emergency preparations. Each day demanded focus, precision, and quick thinking. Yet every challenge he faced reinforced his confidence. He realized that the skills he had honed over years in a modest garage were highly valuable in this larger, high-stakes setting. More importantly, the values he had relied on, patience, integrity, courage, and a dedication to helping others, proved to be just as important as his technical knowledge. The CEO took a personal interest in his growth, offering mentorship and guidance. They shared insights into leadership, decision-making, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. The mechanic listened and learned, finding parallels between the high-pressure scenarios of their business world and the life-and-death urgency of the ambulance night. He began to see how his actions could have broader impact, shaping not only outcomes but also inspiring others through example. One day, during a routine inspection of the facility, the CEO paused to speak with the mechanic privately. They expressed deep gratitude once again, recounting how critical his quick repair had been in saving their life. The CEO spoke of how, without his intervention, the outcome could have been tragically different. The mechanic felt a surge of humility and pride. He had acted out of instinct, not expecting any recognition, and yet his actions had reverberated far beyond what he had imagined. It was a moment of reflection that reminded him of the profound influence even small acts of courage could have. As his role expanded, the mechanic began to lead a small team of technicians, sharing his knowledge and approach to handling emergencies. He emphasized the importance of teamwork, clear thinking, and quick action. His leadership style was grounded in respect and practical experience, earning the trust of those around him. People began to look up to him, inspired by the story of how a small-town mechanic had acted decisively in a life-threatening situation. The mechanic never sought accolades, but he could not ignore the positive impact of his actions and the opportunities they created for others. Beyond the workplace, the mechanic's personal life began to shift. His confidence grew, his perspective broadened, and his sense of purpose deepened. He reflected often on the stormy night that had set this journey in motion. It had been a moment that demanded action without thought for reward, and that very decision had opened doors he had never imagined. He realized that integrity, courage, and skill combined could lead to unexpected and transformative outcomes. Community recognition also followed. The local town celebrated his courage, sharing his story as an example of selflessness and skill. Young people spoke of him as a role model, and the story inspired others to act with courage and responsibility in their own lives. The mechanic remained humble, always highlighting the collective effort, the paramedics' bravery, the support from colleagues, and the urgency of the situation. Yet he could not deny that his life had been changed dramatically. Months passed, and the mechanic found a balance between his work with the CEO and maintaining the hands-on skills that had always defined him. He continued to engage with engines, vehicles, and emergency equipment, ensuring that his practical expertise remained sharp. He also began mentoring apprentices, teaching them not just the mechanics of engines, but also the importance of ethical choices, calmness under pressure, and acting decisively in moments of crisis. He wanted them to understand that skill alone was not enough. Character and courage mattered equally. Through it all, the mechanic carried a quiet sense of gratitude. He had been tested in ways he could never have anticipated, faced adversity when being fired seemed unjust, and had experienced the profound impact of one selfless act. The journey had taught him resilience, patience, and the unpredictable nature of life. He understood now that life's most significant moments often arise unexpectedly, requiring courage and action without hesitation. The CEO's ongoing support, the opportunities for growth, and the recognition from the community all reinforced a central lesson. The right action, performed with skill and integrity, can create a ripple effect far beyond what anyone expects. The mechanic's life was no longer defined solely by the small-town garage where he had started, but by the choices he made, the courage he showed, and the lives he impacted along the way. As he looked back on the journey from that rainy night to the present, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The challenges, the uncertainty, and the fear had all led to growth, opportunity, and recognition. He had acted selflessly, faced the consequences of his decisions, and emerged not just successful but transformed. His story became a testament to the power of integrity, courage, and action in shaping one's life and the lives of others. On quiet evenings, he would walk through the town streets, reflecting on the journey and the people whose lives had intertwined with his own. The memory of the storm, the ambulance, the patient, and the unexpected recognition remained vivid, a constant reminder of how a single moment could change everything. And he understood that life would continue to offer moments that demanded courage, moments where he would need to trust his skills, instincts, and values. The mechanic had become more than a technician. He had become a symbol of action, courage, and integrity. His life had shifted from ordinary to extraordinary, not through ambition or desire for reward, but through the simple act of doing what was right when it mattered most. He continued to work, to teach, and to inspire, knowing that the story of that night, the repair, the risk, the urgency would live on, motivating others to act with compassion, skill, and bravery whenever life called upon them. And in that understanding, he found a lasting sense of purpose, fulfillment, and peace.